What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Alto again, and this time we are here with Cammie of Oceans of Slumber. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's an honor to be able to speak with you today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah, it's so awesome to be able to talk with you. Oceans of Slumber, I would say, has been on one of the most consistent creative sprees. I discovered you guys on the Banished Heart, and every 2 years, we had the self-titled album. Following that, Starlight and Ash, and now we got this new album, Where Gods Fear to Speak. Was Where Gods Fear to Speak intended to be like a sequel or a continuation of Starlight and Ash, or was this meant to be like a new beginning for Oceans of Slumber?
Yeah, it's just a new conversation. It's not Starlight Nash is very singular for itself. Written during the pandemic and stylistically, we were pulling on our more kind of country folk, more intimate sound. This is just something completely different,
Yeah.
completely new.
Was there a vision you had in mind going to the making of Where Gods Fear to Speak, or was this very like improvisational? I know that Dauber is very much like a mad scientist behind what he does, so like I don't know if there was any forethought that went into it, or you all just went right into it with no preconceived idea.
There's usually a lot of there's a good over encompassing idea of what we want to do, and then there's a lot of conversation between Dauber and I on themes and ideas about the songs, and then how quickly the individual songs come together are where it's maybe less deliberation leading up to them. But this album definitely has a theme and an overall idea, and it's meant to be very cinematic and feel like a movie soundtrack. Basically, the post-apocalyptic sort of sci-fi future where we're in the full mechanism of this sort of religious oversight intertwined with corporate greed, and we're all just kind of tolling away for the greater good of this bigger entity and depriving ourselves. And so it definitely has these central themes throughout, while internalizing this individual struggle with breaking away from this preconceived notion and this dogma that they've been sort of implanted with.
Is this almost like an external metaphor for the world that we currently live in, or for the worlds that we live in, or was this almost very fantasy oriented, almost like you and Dauber and everybody were like making up sort of like your own worlds that only exist within the Oceans of Slumber universe?
I think that there's definitely influence from our life experiences, books we read, movies we watch, and conversations we have that all play a part in the concept of the album. It's definitely meant to, well, I guess not meant to, but it definitely just has elements of real world struggles that we've seen and real world temperaments that are going on. We're not isolated from the wars and the headlines and the AI takeover, like we're deeply in it, and all these things are meant to play a part in the overall message and themes of the album. So a little bit of all of those things.
I find what I've always found so unique about Oceans of Slumber is that, everything from I've discovered lyrically and whatnot, it's always demonstrated so beautifully. Like A Return to the Earth Below, I think, is one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard in my life. But to have the lyrics, when the darkness gathers, we are crawling, like that just, you read that and that sounds very goosebump inducing and very fearful, and then you listen to the song and it's very tranquil. Like, how, I guess for lack of better ways of asking this question, how do you almost combine like the darkness and the beauty together in one? Is there sort of like a balance or a scale that you have to maintain?
I guess I feel like that's what I feel like that's what best describes me. And Not to be like, oh, okay, I'm so beautiful, but I feel like there's a perception of me largely based on looks. And when I try and speak about things seriously or deeply or darkly, I've found throughout my life that in certain realms, it can be very like off-putting. There's what people see and what they expect to get from you. And I think that balance is something I've naturally come to do well, because it's how I feel like I have to navigate how I am as a person. That I am a pretty dark person, you could say. You know, these lyrics and these ideas and these thoughts, they come from things I think about and how I see things often. And the macabre of my style and my outlook and the dreariness that maybe I paint things, you know, I'm not a pink and pastel type of girl. And so when it comes to writing these lyrics and delivering them in a way that feels softer, I think it's just something I've come to learn to possess, because how you say things helps people digest what you're saying to them.
I love the way you said that. Yeah.
And that's something a lot of people have to learn, but definitely as women, you learn to navigate maybe a little bit more fine-tuned, because tone can get you into so much trouble. And you have to learn to sidestep, you know, people's egos. So when it comes to the music, the balance is there, because I feel like the music is so heavy and it's already helping amplify whatever it is I'm saying, that I don't have to also deliver it so intensely. It's like the two marry each other and the message is conveyed, it's understood.
Do you feel when, like, because it's very cathartic when we can let the darkness in our demons, when we create art to express that, you know? I remember first hearing The Banished Heart for the first time, and I was instantly able to tell that you were letting out everything on that album, and that was coming from here and only here, and the same can be said about all the other albums you're on. But I've always said that when darkness and agony and the macabre is the fuel to our fire, sometimes we could become victimized by our own product in that regard. Do you find that maybe addressing this in your music, it makes the songwriting just as deteriorating as it can be cathartic?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest struggle and the biggest thing I've had to learn in approaching my songwriting is to not become too engulfed in the despair. It's almost like, I guess, how you have method actors, you have like method musicians, and it's like I sing from a place that's very emotional. It's like there's nothing. I don't think of myself as technically trained or professionally trained, and so when I sing, it's a raw reaction to how the music makes me feel that I put words to, and there's no phoning it in. There's no like not feeling it. It's like me having a hard conversation with someone every time I sing this song. Like, it doesn't really make it any easier. I might be in a better mood, and then I can convey it with a little less stress on myself, but that's how I sing, and that's where my singing comes from. And so when I write these songs, I'm diving into these bad places, or I'm really trying to put myself in the shoes of people hurting, and that can be obviously kind of damaging, and like you said, deteriorating for the person doing it. And so I've had to learn to look at it maybe a little bit more clinically, you know, and I try and look at it like, okay, I'm a psychologist and I have to be in this room and help these people. Can I objectively kind of look at this and draw out these ideas without necessarily putting myself back in my worst memories or my worst times? And so that's definitely been something I've had to work on, because I would say like the album, almost every album's followed by a great deal of depression, either while right when I finish writing, when I'm writing, and then we go into the studio to record, or right after it's recorded. And I would say like with this album, I spread out. I started writing a lot earlier on, and I spread it out so that I could give myself time in between songs. And then these songs were a little bit more, I guess, like charged and resisting and rebelling. And so they were a little bit more about overcoming than succumbing. So I think that helped, and that was a new approach to where I don't feel like I fell into such a depression or had such an internal battle this time around.
When you replicate these songs live, because as somebody who's had the privilege of seeing Oceans of Slumber live numerous times and in multiple ways, I've seen, you do the intimate, more acoustic side of Oceans of Slumber, as well as going all in. Again, that St. Vitus, rest in peace show was just truly an altering experience. It didn't feel like I was seeing Oceans of Slumber at St. Vitus that night. It felt like I was seeing Oceans of Slumber in some other parallel universe that can't be accessed elsewhere. So when you are performing these songs live and you're sharing an experience with your viewers and your listeners, do you think that maybe changes or alters the context of your material? Does maybe that intimate setting of bringing people together in music maybe make the despair almost like, does it almost put you in a, for lack of better words, a happier place when you're bringing this to people than when you were recording it in an isolated vocal booth,
Oh yeah, for sure. I would say it's a more shared like fulfilling place to where when it can connect with the people that need it, it feels like healing versus suffering. So I feel like when you're alone going through something, you're like suffering, but when you're together going through something, you're healing. And it's by sharing that load, like sharing the weight of the trauma, that I think helps people get through it. And the shows are that aspect. It's like I'm doing a duty versus just lamenting, if that makes sense. Because the catharsis that it allows people in the crowd, the release that it allows people in the crowd, they're holding it in or they're holding it back. It's been on their mind. It's been bothering them. And then, people are like bawling at the shows, and or they come afterwards and they share, it's like, man, I had this weight and the song like resonated tonight and it helps me let it dissipate. And so I feel like when I perform, I get to be out of my body about it. I get to be out of my head, and I'm this vessel for the song to amplify onto the people, and they get to heal. And then in turn, their healing helps me heal that wound that it came from. And it's this circle of healing versus, suffering.
It almost seems like the cycle for every album is almost like another cycle of healing wounds in a way.
Absolutely. Like for me, for us, the band as artists, like that's where our music comes from, and that's what our music is meant to do. Like it very much has a serious purpose. We're not a party band. We're not a chug beers to band. We're a therapy session band, whether you
I've seen plenty of people wasted at your shows having a good time, but I know what you mean. Like, granted, yeah. I do blame the Finnish Insomnium crowd for maybe being the bad influence that night, but I know what you mean.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
But, I've always heard that inspiration, I feel like every song is almost lightning in a bottle in and of itself, because inspiration just strikes out of the blue. Do you almost go looking for inspiration? Do you almost have like a place that you go to gather lyrical and musical ideas, or do you just kind of let it have to strike you in a way?
I'm not as good, like this is something that Dauber and I have talked about, and I'm not as good at finding things that inspire me, that I do wait around. And sometimes I feel like nowadays, maybe more than in the past, it's easy for inspiration to be like sucked away from you, because waiting around isn't really waiting anymore. You're like on social media, like there's always just content in your face that isn't really inspiring. It's just placeholders and time wasters that, I struggle with where to find inspiration sometimes. And as my life has moved on, and like as I've gotten older, and as I like socialize less, and it's something that Dauber helps me greatly overcome by inspiring me himself, but putting me in situations where it reminds me that I'm inspired by these things, or helps me find inspiration to these things. It's like, okay, we're gonna go to Galveston and we're gonna go visit the cemetery there, the annually these beautiful flowers bloom. And I go down there and I'm like, oh yeah, like I can seek these things out. Like I can go to these places that are like supercharged and find stories, but in like a real world way. Searching endlessly online is going to feel like searching online. And sometimes you got to get out of your head and like into the real world. And he helps me do that. And that's how I feel like I find inspiration from books, from movies. Like he knows where to look for better substance than I do sometimes.
I think it's like there is more inspiration, and I put inspiration in quotes, there is more inspiration everywhere than we've ever had. It really is like water, where it is everywhere, whether it be on the internet or just walking outside your door. There's inspiration everywhere, but real inspiration that really, it's almost like going to a bookstore in a way, and like, go to Barnes and Noble, you see thousands of books everywhere, but there's only going to be maybe that one book that where the side cover, you just see the title there, it intrigues you, and then it's vibrant enough where you pull that out. I feel like the world is like one giant library in that regard.
Absolutely. I think that like there's right. I feel like there's things that are interesting and inspiring, but there's not as many things that I feel like call me to action. And it's like those are the things I'm looking for, to where it's like, wow, this sent off a firework and now I have to write, or I have to draw, or I have to find out more because I'm turning this into something, and it's going to be this new line of thought that I can't let go. And that inspiration sometimes is harder for me to find. But when I do, then, I make sure I collect it, and then, I tell Dauber about it, and we create things out of it.
And I also wanted to ask that this is like almost like a debate I have with artists in a way, because I get different opinions on it, because the evolution that I've seen, I believe Winter was your first record with Oceans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so from Winter to The Banished Heart, the self-titled Starlight, and this new album, as well as the EP from 2015, like there is so much evolution and so much growth demonstrated. It really is admirable to witness what you and Dauber and everybody all really were able to create together. Is evolution something you can control as an artist? Do you dictate your evolution in a way, or do you just kind of have to let it happen naturally? Because I'd imagine, like, when you, for instance, were making the self-titled record, you weren't just trying to like rehash or continue. You're a different person when you made that than when you made The Banished Heart. So I'm just wondering if you could really control your own evolution or not.
I would say it's controlled chaos. If anything, it's not something that we think about to that extent. It's the mindset of like everything we do, we want to outdo the last thing that we did, but we're constantly learning and expanding as artists. We're constantly practicing and expanding on our expertise, that each time we're trying to give our best, and then that ultimately changes because now we just have new tools, we have new elements to what it is that we do, that I would say it's not, for me at least, it's not a conscious evolution. It's just I'm trying to get better all the time, and I'm meant to get better. And so with each album, I have something new to bring, because in the meantime, I've just been learning still.
And you led me perfectly into the final question I wanted to ask you, because you have, again, great lyricism that I think is very relatable, very thought-provoking. You also are very technically impressive, and sometimes it's hard to find somebody who's capable of both. Do you find that maybe the technical aspects of your vocal abilities, especially having many different usages of your voice, do you sometimes have, like, is there an element of, with the technical aspect and then the very artistic aspect and the emotional aspect, where maybe they don't really like combine together like oil and water in a way? Like, is there a time where maybe like the technical aspect kind of butts heads with the more artistic aspect of what you do?
I would say, if anything, it causes friction when I'm not doing enough technically. Mm-hmm. That I tend to like play it safe so that it's strong and mistake free. So I won't say perfect, because like nothing's perfect. Obviously, it's very subjective. but it's like, I pride myself off sounding like how we record, how I sound live, how I sound practicing, being as similar as possible and consistent as possible. And so I sometimes am wary of doing something too just turned up, because I know my voice and I'm like, can I replicate this if I'm tired, if we're on tour, if I'm congested, that I'm like, the technical part overshines me sometimes, and like, well, don't go for that, because how easy is that to replicate across all the modes of my instrument being my mood and my health.
Yeah.
So with this album, Dauber's like, just turn it up. Like, it doesn't matter. We'll figure it out, or we won't do it live.
Yeah.
But it's like, turn it on, turn it up. Like, do more technical things, because it really will strike the emotion of just how intense the lyrics are.
Yeah.
And the marriages in some of these songs of that were out of my comfort zone vocally, because I was just trying things. If I'm always at the cusp of like, okay, I learned, it's like you're I don't know, like if you're a sports person or you're like a professional pool player and you learn this trick, well, now you're in the competition and you're like, I just learned this trick, like, should I try it, right? And usually if the line of like what I just learned or what I feel confident in for new stuff is here, and then recording is here, I didn't let them be right lined up. It would be like, I'm going to be back here, and then the line, it moves like that. But this time it was like, we're right at the line of everything I've been learning, everything I've been trying to do, working on runs, working on variations, working on the growls, and it's like, just do it now.
I love
And so that's where it kind of was different this time around.
I love that. That's very inspiring to hear. And I think that's a great lesson people could learn. Because, look, I know people who could sing their ass off and do it so well, but they lack the spiritual aspect of it. And I think there's people who are very spiritual and they really love it and they show passion, but technically speaking, they're kind of novice. And there is really that fine line. You don't want to be, dead, like a fucking robot singer in a way, but you also don't want to be a bad singer as well. So there is that balance at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been something that I've just learned over time how to work with. I feel like in the beginning it was a lot of passion, but I kept it pretty straightforward. And this album, like I said, there's switching from growls right into a clean belt. It's like, that shit's hard. And I'm like, well, we want to do these songs live. That means then I just got to perfect this new trick, and it's a challenge and it's fun. And I think that that's what keeps me as an artist evolving and just getting better. Like I'm never satisfied with how I sound. And I don't have this idea, like I sound so good. Like, I'm just like, I like this song. What else can I do? Like how can I be better? And it's not so self-deprecating, but I really don't get caught up, and I don't take for granted that I have a voice that's capable of doing what I want it to do when I want it to do it. And that's really all it comes down to.
Yeah. And we are very thankful that you that we get to hear your voice. It inspires, enlightens, and deepens all of us, and I'm truly grateful for that. Just before we go, I want to, again, thank you for your time today and for such a great conversation. And as usual, thank you and Dauber and everybody and Oceans of Slumber for just your amazing art that is just truly breathtaking, and for another great album. Just the usual promotional stuff with Where God's Fear to Speak is coming out very soon. What else could we be expecting from Oceans of Slumber, if you are allowed to say at this very moment, of course?
Well, we're playing Metal Injection at the end of the month,
Yep.
September 21st to the 23rd.
I'll be there.
Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you.
Yep.
We have an album release show in Houston, October 19th, at Scout Bar. And really that's all that's on the calendar right now. So probably just kind of coasting through the end of the year. We have some surprise releases as far as like videos and things go, and more behind the scenes footage of when we were in Bogota. So just kind of taking it easy. while we wait for the release.
Yeah, the end of the year is coming soon, but I know that 2025 is going to be the year of Slumber in a good. So thank you so much. Everybody, we are here with Oceans of Slumber, where gods fear to speak. Be sure to pick that up. We will see you next time on Heavy New York.